Hello. Good morning or good after. I guess it's good afternoon even where I am. So, welcome. Welcome wherever you are, and feel free to just give me a little wave with a like or a heart or a comment. I love it when this becomes an opportunity for dialogue, whatever the actual conversation is. I love it when it's a dialogue, and when you bring your comments or your questions or shares to the dialogue. So, diving right in. Awesome. Hi, Miriam. Nice to see you. So, this, I don't know if any of you who saw like what I put in there, what I wanted to talk about was this idea of I'll have what I'm having. And the kind of the history of that is, it's probably multiple fold, but anyway, in my life, it's kind of twofold. And it starts right, there's this great movie, When Harry Met Sally. And if any of you haven't seen When Harry Met Sally, it's just a great movie. And there's a whole other piece of it where the guy character, anyway, he says this thing about pecan pie, and sometimes I say that to my kids, and so totally randomly, this is a complete tangent here, but at the dinner table the other day, I was telling them, I was like, someday you're gonna watch When Harry Met Sally. I'm like, but when you're a grown-up, like that's a grown-up movie. Anyway, tangents aside, in the movie When Harry Met Sally, there's a male and a female character, and they go out to lunch, and the woman, yes, exactly, Miriam, the restaurant scene. The woman, honestly, I can't even remember why. I should probably watch the movie again. But she like fakes an orgasm. I think she's making the point that all women fake orgasms at some point, and that men don't always know. But that's irrelevant to this to this Facebook Live. But just very loudly and publicly in the restaurant, kind of fakes an orgasm. And then another woman at another table, about like 3 tables over, she points to that character and she says, I'll have what she's having. So that's kind of the origin of the I'll have what she's having. And I worked with a coach about 2.5 years ago now, and she built some of her signature programs around this idea, I'll have what she's having. And what I took from that was this piece of, I was like, wait, I don't really want to be pointing somewhere else and saying, I'll have what she's having. What would it take for me every morning to wake up and say, I'll have what I'm having? And that became it's a guiding principle. I think that I had that as an unconscious guiding principle for much of my life. And it wasn't until I heard my coach at the time articulate this idea of I'll have what she's having, that it became a conscious articulation for me that I wanted to be able to say, I'll have what I'm having. Hey, Michael, nice to see you. So again, maybe 2.5 years ago, it was less that was a total reorientation for me. Hey, Rachel, that there was some way that there was like an unconscious orientation in my life, but that it really was, I was able to now consciously and explicitly articulate and use that for me as actually like a guiding principle to wake up in the morning, and what would it take for me to say, I'll have what I'm having? So that phrase may work for you, or there may be some slight rephrasing of that makes more sense to you, but the principles of it, I think, are somewhat universal. And I look at it from like the really big picture that I can stand where I'm standing and I could go like, okay, 3 years from now, I mean, this is something that people do when they vision, or if you work with a coach or these various things, it's like, what's your 3-year vision? What's your 5-year vision? What's your 10-year vision? And the way that I like to orient around that is, what would it be like to say, I'll have what I'm having? Let me just see. Oh, that's very funny, Miriam, that it was the director's actual mother who did. Like, that's such a sort of a classic scene from a movie. So, but sometimes I think, and I've written about or talked about this and written about this in other ways, is how easy it is to sort of lose ourselves in visioning. And it's easy to look outside of ourselves or get into what we think we should want. And it's why I really like this orientation of I'll have what I'm having, because it inherently brings the attention back to myself and my own, like if I woke up in the morning, it's easy. For instance, there's kind of a cliche, especially in like the entrepreneurial world, or like solopreneur, to see pictures of people working from the beach, or living in a different country every month, and those are like incredible pictures, and they're very, even for me, and I'm a total homebody, I can see images like that, for instance, on Facebook, and I can be like, oh, well, that looks good, and kind of fall outside of myself into someone else's vision, someone else's picture for life. And there's lots of ways that we fall outside of ourselves. So it's really useful to have some question or some orientation that inherently brings it back to, what do I want? And for many people, the question, what do I want, actually is a challenging one. Sometimes that has to do with like our family of origin, the way we were raised, that it wasn't okay to have desires, or either our parents' desires, or the like orienting towards the community, our family, and what our family needed was more important than orienting. So we can get lost sometimes asking that direct of a question. Well, what do you want? What do I desire? And I think for me, that again, that orientation, like I'll have what I'm having, it's so visceral. It's like, if I'm eating a meal, would I rather have what I'm having, or like what the person across from me is having? Or that it has this very visceral orientation that isn't so heady. So again, it can really be in that bigger or more long-term orientation of like, what would I'll have what I'm having look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? But it also, oh, hey, Naomi, it's nice to see you too. It also, again, for me, it was very orienting day to day and in the moment. Like, what would creating my life today, if I was going to walk through every step of my life today and be able to say, I'll have what I'm having, what would I actually do? What steps would I take? What way would I go? How would I, beyond even the like, what would it look like? Like, where would I be? And all these ideas that we have about like being able to say, I'll have what I'm having. But, again, to reference the I'll have what she's having, it's like she was sort of saying, I'll order what she's ordering. Like, I'll eat that food because it created that effect in her, right? She had an orgasm at the table in a restaurant. And, but that points also to, how do I want to feel? As I walk through my life, like the I'll have what I'm having is basically, it's an orientation that says, I want to stand in my own shoes. I want to stand on my own feet. I want to live in my own skin. I want to wear the clothes I'm wearing. I want to feel the way I'm feeling. It's an orientation to actually choosing my life in all its facets. And there's I think one of the things I love too about this I'll have what I'm having is that how do I want to say this? Simultaneously, like I was saying, that it has a very visceral reaction, that it's less heady than like, what do I want or what do I want to create? Like, what do I need? What will have me say, I'll have what I'm having, has like a visceral sort of impact. And simultaneously, it's kind of gentle. For me, it feels less aggressive or like I have to change everything. It's just like, oh, well, is there anyone that I'm looking at and saying, I'll have what she's having? Or I wish I was living that life. Or, you know, envy and jealousy are these incredible, like, guiding posts to go that if I'm feeling envy or if I'm feeling jealousy, some part of me must be saying, I wish I had that instead of what I have. Let me see, Miriam. Yeah, I'm glad that you love that phrase. Yeah. So it sounds like you have that experience too, which is like, what do you want? Which sort of like either creates like a defensive, it sounds like in you, that go away, or some pushback or something like that. Yeah, this question, it's like, I'll have what I'm having. And I think it's simultaneously, so again, looking at like envy and jealousy as these kind of signposts, instead of saying like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, or I should celebrate what that person has instead of envying it, is noticing that means that either consciously or unconsciously, I am imagining that I would rather have what they have. And so again, very gently, there's something about this, like, I'll have what I'm having, that is like a really gentle call into radical responsibility. Rather than saying like, I'm at cause, or I get to choose, or what am I going to create? And which all of those are really beautiful. And if they work, when they work, like, by all means use them. But I find that like asking the question, what will have me be able to say, I'll have what I'm having, is like this gentle inquiry into how can I take responsibility? If everything I've done to some extent has led me to have this, in what way can I say like, okay, so some part of me was saying, I'll have this. You know, some part of me said, I'll have vanilla, and now like consciously I'm saying, actually, I'd rather have chocolate. So what had me ask for vanilla when I got to the counter, or every step I took led me to this, and what can I do even in this moment that would have me just a little bit more say like, oh yeah, I'll have what I'm having, because there's no other life I would rather be living than my own. The other thing I love about that is, again, it brings in this kind of holistic view, which is that there might be things, right? I might look over there and go like, man, you know, like, I wish I had that house. But if I fall too far into like a certain envy and jealousy, I can imagine that I actually want to be living the life of the person who's in that house. And that is a much more painful experience, right? If I'm not conscious about it and I think like, that life actually looks better or easier, somehow that life would feel better to walk in than my own. Especially, I think we do this a lot unconsciously, and it's like it creates an internal divide inside ourselves where we're living one life, and simultaneously part of us is saying, it would be better if I was living another life. And so having this phrase like, can I in this moment, standing right here, or sitting here, or doing what I'm doing, following this particular path in life, can I truly say, I'll have what I'm having? And if not, it allows sort of the subtlety of, well, what would have me say that? And it takes it out of sort of this unconscious realm. So again, maybe I want that house, or I want something that looks like that. I imagine, and then I start to have to take it into the more subtle and specific, which is like, well, what about that? Like, do I want to be, if it's, you know, that woman lives in that house, do I actually want to be her? Do I want to be married to her husband? Like, no, I want, you know, all these things, but what is it that I actually want about that? And it starts to, it's like this very, very gentle demand that I both bring my desires into the specific, and that I start to take responsibility for them. Like, oh, there's this thing that I want, and why would that have me wake up and say, I'll have what I'm having? And again, then that actually brings it more into the feeling realm. So one of my mentors, Rich Litvin, often says, whatever it is that we imagine we want to create is a place to come from, not a place to get to. And this phrase, like, I'll have what I'm having, for me, that feels that way to me, because it invites the question of, like, where do I need to come from? In what way can I feel that way now? Can I feel, maybe it's a sense of ease or abundance or ownership in my space, right? Again, if I have this idea, I want to own a house, or I want to own that house, or I want a yard with a garden, I can still keep taking steps day by day into, like, more closer and closer to the realization of maybe what's like the full blossoming of that I'll have what I'm having. But it also invites like, well, what would have me say that today? If I can't buy a house today, thanks, Jean. Yes, exactly. I'm glad that resonates for you. If I can't buy that house today, and even frankly, if I had $1 million, I probably couldn't buy that house today. And so it has this step-by-step quality to, like, what's the step I would take now that would have me say, I'll have what I'm having. And it becomes this very gentle and I think more fluid. There's something that's so beautiful about creating the big goals out there, but then ultimately it has to be like, and in this moment, what's the step I take? And in this moment, what's the step I take? You know, maybe today, what's the thing I need to do that might be a big step, but also moment to moment. And for me, it really deeply invites this moment to moment inquiry into how I want to feel and who I need to be to feel that way. Because yes, there are things that I want to create, and there's things I actually want in life, and there's objects and spaces and travel, like there are things that I want that I can work towards. But for me, so much of the time, what I really want is to feel a certain way. And a lot of what I want, I love actually, I think that Craig is here because he was my coach for a time, and I really came to this in a conscious way working with him, is this idea of spaciousness. And I can create that in any moment. So there are moments when, or, you know, periods of my day or life that are very fast, or I'm, you know, it happened this morning, frankly. I was getting the kids to school and I was like, everybody just, you know, do what I say and make it happen, like snappy, make it snappy. And the experience that I want in my life is one of spaciousness. And I actually have that capacity. Like this morning, if I had slowed down enough to ask myself the question, will I have what I'm having, would be like, no, this is absolutely not the ice cream sundae I want to be eating. And in the moment, having the opportunity, I can actually pause. And I do this all day long. Like, this is a really big one for me. So this may not be the action for you, right? You may have a different one and come to a different conclusion about moment to moment what it is. But probably 100 times a day, I stop and I look around. Like even now while I've been doing this live, a number of times I look this way, and a lot of what I'm doing is I'm looking at the trees, because that has a almost immediate like truing up where I'll have what I'm having. When I stop and I look at the trees, or I notice a hummingbird, or I see a beautiful flower, or this morning I saw a hawk sitting totally still on a telephone wire. Like, those are the moments where I can absolutely, without reservation, say, I'll have what I'm having. Naomi says, envy is only valuable if it's inspiring and motivating us to act after appreciating our life now in each moment while creating better and different. Absolutely. Yeah, the powers in the paradox. I wrote down this quote. I don't know who said it. I meant to look it up so that I could find out who said it. But I remember when I heard a teacher say this many, many years ago, probably 15 years ago now. They said, if you're not grateful for what you have, what makes you think you're going to be grateful for more? And I remember, like, it literally felt like I got hit in the head. I was just like, holy shit, that is everything. Because absolutely I can want more, but it, like, the actual experience of living a life with more money or more travel or more ease or more whatever it is, I think I want more and more boots. Will I actually feel different? And if I don't, practicing gratitude for what I have now is not an act of trying to stay in homeostasis for now. It's actually simply the muscle of feeling good with what I have, no matter what I have, whether it's less or more. Let's see, I'm going to try to find, because Miriam said, I applied the phrase to feeling my own feelings and knowing what I know, even when it goes against group norms or cultural norms, not falling into being like and agreeing with. Yeah, the comments, they get cut off because I think I'm on my phone, so I can't see them. But I think what you're saying is this other piece that, again, around like, I'll have what I'm having. And it's really fascinating because, for instance, like, I surround myself with some, I mean, I run in different circles, but some of the circles of groups that I run with are people who are doing really quite extraordinary things in the world. And I can get really caught up in like, oh, I should have a big plan like that, or I should be starting a foundation, or, right, Allison, like, I should have more boots, always more boots. But I should, you know, like, all these things, or even people who are like traveling a lot and, oh, I should want that. That's like that's the fun, sexy desire. And again, this is for me, but when I come back to it, what I crave over and over and over again is simplicity. Simplicity, spaciousness, quiet, slowing down, the capacity to pay attention. And no matter what the norm is around you, it is a human tendency, and it comes from a very, very natural place to wanting to belong. But our tendency to want to fit in with what's going on, and that it does, just like you're saying, Miriam, like, it's a conscious act to come back and say, no, wait, what will have me say, I'll have what I'm having? Not I'll have what he's having, or I'll have what she's having, or that looks good over there. But to over and over say, I'll have what I'm having, like this life, the one that my feet are standing in. Jean says, when I'm truly struggling with something big and at my wit's end, I go within and quietly ask, God, how do you want me to be with this? Yes. Yeah. It's beautiful. And I think we can all have the different way of how do we come back to ourselves. And I have a number of friends who, whether they call it God or something else, have some reference point like that really has this sense of like, yeah, how can I relate to this? Or what is it that you want of me? And so whether it's that kind of a question, or it's like, what will have me say, I'll have what I'm having, or what does my gut tell me? What does my intuition say? This is a little bit different, but I'm leading a group of women right now through a process of really getting in touch with how do I even know what my yes and my no feel like in my body. Because we say all the time to people like, well, you know, be able to say yes to your yeses, say no to your nos, and but then so often we actually get stuck and say like, but how do I know which is which? And so really leading like this subtle process of getting in touch with, at a visceral level, again, how do I even know what's a yes and what's a no? And I think like you're saying, Jean, there's that sense of coming back regularly to something, whatever the question is, whatever the touch point is. The more regularly we come back and check in with it, the more likely we are to know how to tell like the authenticity of the response, like the true and deep authenticity, not just like, this is my habit and this is what feels comfortable, so it must be what's true. I know, isn't that an amazing quote? This, if I'm not grateful for what I have, how will I be grateful for more? It's still, when I actually, if I say it or I come across it, like there's this way that it really, it's like it rings a bell that just reverberates and reverberates and reverberates over and over. So let me just check in here the comments before we, the desire to slow down and simplify. Yes, Naomi. It really, this desire to slow down and simplify, it's an interesting, I mean, I just think culturally it's not, it's not like the supported desire. There's things move quite fast, and it's like an underlying assumption within the culture that somehow progress always means more or faster. And it actually came up from, this is like a total tangent here, but maybe I'll leave you guys with this tangent. But there, again, within like my mentor, Rich Litvin, and within the community that I'm part of with him, there's a lot of talk around an exponential life. And I noticed, and it's not that anyone was saying this, but I noticed that there was a thread that started to run through that, was that it was always bigger. It was a bigger mission. It was more people. It was bigger numbers in terms of like money or impact. And it just, something inside me kind of, and I think again, it really, like there's this, this idea of I'll have what I'm having has become this very fundamental reference point for me. And so something about that wasn't clicking, and I really had to look at like, I think what was happening was that I was rebelling against it. I was unconsciously rebelling because that was the only way I could say no at first, kind of unconsciously. And then I caught myself, and rather than just saying, I don't want that, I started to ask like, is it possible to have exponential simplicity? What about exponential spaciousness? And does exponential have to link to like a more and bigger and better and faster? Or can it be exponential? Like, can I magnify what I want? And I'm still in the inquiry. I don't really have an answer exactly. Yes. Well, I think that's true, Miriam. When you get older, and that's to some extent happening for me. I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to be 40 in a few months. And I do think I think I've always had an inclination towards simplicity, which partly could come from growing up in a Buddhist monastery. And also that the Buddhist monastery being literally in the middle of the wilderness with no electricity, and, so that's like in my bones. That's part, my DNA says like, give me quiet and space and simplicity. But I do see some of that happen for people as they get older. But I also see that like a certain dismissiveness of that. And my sense is, I'm certainly not like a cultural anthropologist, so I don't have a lot of ground to stand on here, but my sense is that there was, in the times when our elders were more like revered, that was part of the wisdom, that the wisdom actually that our elders could give us actually was having the arc, being able to look at the arc of life and say like, oh, you can slow down. I mean, I these days I can say like, oh yeah, I'll do that in 5 years. And that seems fast to me. Like I look at my kids and I think there are things that I don't want to do until they're a certain age, and it's, you know, it's 5 years from now, and I just feel like, oh, I have time. Like, there's 5 years is nothing. It's like the blink of an eye. And so I see culturally there is a way still that particular wisdom tends to be brushed aside, and that there's like a faster, more, better, you know, the upgrade. We move through technology like that. But I love finding, at least in this format here, that there are those of you who resonate with me and the simplicity and the slowing down. So, I'm gonna kind of wrap a bow on this, if you will, and my invitation, I mean, I think this is always true, is that there are things I want to share because I want them to be an invitation. That in any way, if looking at like, what would have me say, I'll have what I'm having, so that there's any, or noticing any place where you might be saying like, oh, like, I wish I was having what she was having, you know, as though you were in a restaurant and someone ordered something that just looked more delicious than what you have. And even in a restaurant, I mean, this is, again, I go on tangents, but it's like this idea that once we've ordered something, we're wedded to it, and we couldn't see something and go like, oh, I would really rather have what I'm having. My boyfriend came over last night and he said he cooked this salmon and it was awful. He was like, oh, it was just awful. And he was like, do I have to eat it? You know, and I thought like, no, you don't have to eat it. It reminds me also of, I went to the Wisdom 2.0 conference 2 years ago, I think, and I was very excited. I'd heard really good things about it. Ultimately had an opportunity to present at one of the pre-days that they offer, and it was a women in leadership day, and that was just extra, like, oh my God. I mean, the whole thing was fantastic for that. Oh, thank you, Tawny. So good to see you and hear your voice here. But I went, and so that pre-day was like perfect. It was like 50 or 75 women, and it was just extraordinary, and I got to, you know, offer something, and then I went to the whole thing, and it was like thousands of people, and everywhere I turned, I knew somebody, but I didn't, there were very few people that I knew really well, and so I just kind of felt like I was constantly turning and saying hi, and what are you doing, and it was all this like networking, and a lot of presentation, and not a lot of really deep connection. It was very loud and overwhelming to my system. I ended up sitting out and just connecting with 2 friends for a whole bunch of sessions, and then the next day I went home that night. I had a really nice dinner with some people that night, and I went home and I was like, do I have to go tomorrow? Like, I had bought the ticket, you know, I had found childcare for the kids. I had sort of had this, like, I guess I have to go because I was supposed to go to this thing. And I was like, wait a minute. That basically just means like I screwed myself twice. Not only did I spend a couple $1,000s, but also I'm going to force myself to spend an entire day doing something that makes me feel miserable. Like, no, thank you. It's way more, interesting to me to just write off that money, right? And I was staying with friends in the city, and it was this gorgeous day, and I literally lay on their roof deck in San Francisco. I did yoga, and I journaled, and I listened to mantra, and I took a nap, and it was like, that was way more worth my, you know, $2,000 than spending my day in a hotel conference room in San Francisco with a couple other thousand people. So again, I'll have what I'm having, and you get to choose. You actually get to choose inside, to some extent, the circumstances of your life. But, you know, I think a lot of times we also use the circumstances of our lives as excuses. I could easily have said like, well, I guess I have to go to Wisdom 2.0. How am I going to make the best of Wisdom 2.0? Which could have been an interesting thing. Or I could say like, actually, I don't have to go back because you know what? I'm the boss of me. So I'll have what I'm having, and I'm the boss of me. And as always, like, really lovely to be with all of you who are here live. And I so appreciate the dialogue and the conversation. And welcome any of you who are watching the replay to also comment. I'll come back. I'm happy to engage with you in the comments and questions and any shares that you have. Stories from your own life are awesome. And just wish you all, I hope the rest of your day you can say that you'll have what you're having for the rest of the day. Ciao.